Alright guys, welcome back to the channel, welcome back to another video. I'm here to show you how to use the warrior and back properly. I'm joking, just like you, I read his passive completely wrong because Dokkan worded it so long-winded and roundabout that it didn't fully make sense to what he actually did. And I'm in the same boat as you and I'm re-recording this whole video, hence why it's later than it originally would have been instead of yesterday. So the warrior in black Bardock does have 2 dupes level 1 links, and you know what, we're gonna go through his passive now. So the warrior in black reduces damage received by 40%, has base 40% damage reduction no matter what. He will then gain an additional damage reduction of 15% within the same turn before attacking an enemy whose HP is 70% or less. So essentially he has 70% damage reduction before attacking majority of the time, because it doesn't take into account the enemy HP until he attacks afterwards. So after he attacks is when the buffs are actually applied, which is 70% HP or less, he has 55% damage reduction, 40% HP or less, he has 70% damage reduction, because that's when he'll gain the additional 15% within the same turn before attacking an enemy whose HP is 40% or less as well. So the majority of the time he is going to have a full 70%. So here and there you will have to keep an eye on it. So we're doing this video all again. We do have a full heroes team. We do have the Goku's family support. He is starting with 264k attacks, that 121k defense. In terms of links, I think I may just do this. Maybe I'll do that instead. Yeah, maybe I'll do that instead. Allow Goku to get a few stacks off just while we're here. So Bardock, or the warrior in black, is greatly raising attack and defense by 50% for one turn. He also does greatly lower attack and defense by 30% as well. Starts the turn with key +2 attack and defense plus 150, have a 30% chance to crit built into his passive, and then gains an additional 100% attack and defense when attacking, then an additional attack plus 150 and a chance to crit plus 30% when attacking if the target enemy's HP is 70% or less. Now what we starting with numbers. 7.2. It's not bad. It's not bad. Then he'll gain an additional attack plus 150 and a chance of critting plus 30% again when the attacking enemy, or when attacking an enemy if the target enemy's HP is 40% or less. Now this is where the HP restrictions, the HP conditions were read right. So while the damage reduction is fine, the damage reduction is actually pretty good, and getting all of that damage reduction majority of the time is great, especially on a unit that again is a heroes unit and typically has less stats than Dokkan Fest and LRs and is in the realms of side banners and side EZAs. All of that damage reduction is a massive, massive help. Now in terms of the warrior in black actually doing damage, as I said, this is where the HP conditions, in my opinion, are a little bit too restrictive, are a little bit excessive, and in short, I kind of think Dokkan's doing a bit too much, because in order to get the extra 150 and the 30% chance to crit, or the extra 30% chance to crit, enemy's HP needs to be 70% or less. You then need to gain, or then to gain the additional 150 on top of that and the extra 30% chance to crit as well, the target enemy's HP needs to be 40% or less. Now naturally throughout a phase, throughout the fight, these things will happen multiple times because some events naturally have more phases, or stages have more phases. However, once you then beat that phase, that's it. You basically have to start from the beginning again. You have to get that extra 150 for 70% HP or less, and then once they get down to 40% or less, you then get the extra 150. So when an enemy's HP is at 40% or below, you get a ton of extra attack. That's 300%. Then the additional 100% just for the warrior in black attacking, which is great. Then as I said, once you move on to the next phase, or depending on what event you're doing, the next fight in general, you then have to start from the beginning again. So unfortunately, it's not permanent. So I do think that's a little bit annoying. I don't understand all the HP restrictions. Like, maybe build up some other way, or maybe like make it permanent. I don't know. All I know is the way they did it now, I'm really not a fan of. I'll be real. I'm really not a fan of. I mean, we're going to get it right now because Goku's basically dead. So we're going to get an extra, what, 60% chance to crit and an extra 300% attack. And he's doing 10 mil, which is actually pretty solid. And we have almost guaranteed crit right now with the 30 built in and then the extra 60 we get, where we basically almost have just shy of guaranteed crit. That said, that happens on a very specific scenario where the enemy's almost going to be dead. I had to cut that because for some reason I really forgot what the word was. I had it in my head, it was on the tip of my tongue, and I was like, scenario. And I just went blank. I was like, no, that's not it. No, it is it. That's a very specific scenario that isn't going to be happening all the time. Not to mention, you could also just miss it. You know, you could do too much damage with the other two enemies in the rotation, or the other two units, sorry, in the rotation. You could do more damage before basically it's Bardock's turn. You could do a whole extra damage before Bardock comes around. And then you end up missing it completely. I mean, not that it matters, because essentially it moves you through the fight. You know, you get to completing it, which is exactly what you want to do. But naturally, you could just miss out on it. So it's a shame he doesn't have a lot of that, and you kind of have to jump through hoops in a way. I know naturally it's going to happen in fights, like enemies will get their HP lowered because you're doing damage, but to get all the extra attack for Bardock essentially to do good damage, like 7 mil's okay, like I guess for his standard, but it's not good enough in the long run. Like we're used to like 11, 12 plus million being the standard, so you know it's okay, but the fact that you have to wait for all of these really strict conditions to pop off for Bardock to actually do solid or pretty good damage, it's a bit much. It's a bit long-winded. It's a bit extra in my opinion. As I said, I'm not really a fan of all these HP conditions. He also gets an extra 50% attack and launches a guaranteed additional as long as the target enemy is an attack down, defense down, or stunned, or super attack is sealed. Now, a bit more recently in difficult content, you've been able to debuff here and there. So I guess that's something. However, you can't do it too often. You can't do it too frequently. So I kind of feel like, how often are you really going to get that extra 50%? How often are you going to get that guaranteed additional? And then not to mention, you can barely seal, you can barely stun. Aside from other content like SBR, ESBR, Clash, etc, etc, which I'm kind of thinking is his level. Because don't get me wrong, the damage reduction is great. However, there are going to be times where he does lose some of it. And again, he is a heroes unit, so naturally he does have less stats. So he will take a bit more damage, especially of course once you lose some of that extra damage reduction. But then to actually get him to do good or solid damage, as I said, there are only specific occasions they're going to happen when the HP of the enemy just keeps lowering. So you might rather just bring someone else. And what I find kind of annoying about him, right, while the damage reduction is fantastic, while he can actually do, in some scenarios, very solid damage, especially if he gets additionals, because you know he's getting 50% attack and defense each time he super attacks. But it's the amount you have to go through conditionally to get all of that extra crit chance, which is almost guaranteed crit, all of that extra attack, which isn't permanent, you basically have to restart it again, etc, etc. But then also, the Warrior in Black's a Super Saiyan Bardock unit, who also isn't called Super Saiyan Bardock. He's literally called the Warrior in Black. He's never going to share another name with another unit because there's no more hero celebration. This is the only one of him there is going to be. So he's just a bog standard Super Saiyan, pure Saiyan unit who doesn't share the same name with anyone, which would be great for team building because it's so easy to link him with the likes of Saiyan Warrior Race, Saiyan Pride, Super Saiyan, Saiyan Lineage, Prepared for Battle, Fierce Battle, and he goes on Super Saiyans. Now that may not be a 200% lead for him, but that's one of the best 170 leads in the entire game with one of the strongest supports. He could have slotted onto that team nicely. Now damage reduction wise, yeah, fantastic. As I said, because you kind of have to do so much to make him put out some solid numbers, which on those teams, you're doing that as a standard. That's the minimum. 10, 11, 12 mil is like the minimum you're seeing like one of the weakest units do. You kind of, there's no point bringing him on a team like that, even though he had the most potential outside of heroes and crossover, even though there's very little restrictions on these units, which I love, by the way. I've said this multiple times. He had the most potential to go on categories elsewhere. 10.9 million. Again, he's doing decent damage now, but this is only like a specific scenario which an enemy isn't always going to be in. Unless you hit additionals and the HP is quite chunky, which 12 mil and almost a guaranteed crit is nice. Like, don't get me wrong, as I said, the possibility with him is nice. With all these additionals, you're talking like 3-4 super attacks with dupes and pretty much guaranteed crit. As I said, this is a very specific scenario that will constantly come and go throughout the entire battle. And even then, he goes on pure Saiyans, bond with parent and child. But as I said, he had the most potential. But I think for all the effort to get him to actually do some solid damage, it's just not worth it. I mean, he probably doesn't get onto a Super Saiyan team anyway. So it doesn't really matter. Not only that, he goes on Saiyan Day Vegeta's 200 lead, which is also very nice. But again, you'd rather just use someone else. On a Heroes and Crossover team, sure. I said the damage reduction is great. And on those specific scenarios, when you can get all the extra attack, when you can get all the extra crit chance and the additional, as you saw there, he can have a very good one turn. But then it just resets again once you defeat the enemy and move on to the next phase. So it's not like you'll be having it used all too often. But then I guess also on the other hand, you have those scenarios of when it's only going to be about, or the enemy's HP is only going to be in and around that condition. Maybe majority of the time when the Warrior in Black's actually around. So most of the time it doesn't actually matter. I mean, it just depends how you look at it and these very specific scenarios, do you know what I mean? But in terms of the damage reduction, I don't know why Dokkan worded it so long-winded and roundabout. Like, they should have been straight to the point of 40% damage reduction, 15%. They should have worded it better, right? They should have just worded it better. But the damage reduction is great. I think we all mistook the Warrior in Black for being really trash when he's not really. He's not the best, but he's not trash. He's all right. He's solid. But we just weren't familiar with your game, and for that, I apologize. We're Dragon Ball fans, we can't read, even though it is quite long-winded. Damage-wise, I said in one turn, he can actually do very well. It's just a bit long-winded having to essentially reset him and then basically get the enemy's HP down again and then be able to get him to perform well. But the damage reduction, great. The 100% attack and defense and the guaranteed additional that's attached to him getting a final blow, I can't lie, I really don't like final blow conditions because you have to set it up. And if you don't get it, and if you get unlucky with additionals or over lucky in this sense with additionals or crits, you can miss out on it. And to miss out on 100% attack and defense and a guaranteed additional, kind of annoying considering how much it would actually help him out. The additional, not so much, but I mean, it's guaranteed. So you're not going to complain. But the extra stats, especially with how conditional and ever-changing the other ones are attached to the HP conditions, I find final blow conditions so jarring. But I think overall, after using him properly, I think he is solid. He's not as bad as everyone thought he was. I do still think Dokkan worded it really long-winded for no reason at all. Damage-wise, in one turn, he can actually do some solid damage. Then, of course, you have to get the enemy there. And as I said, you don't get to really debuff enemies too much, nor stun, nor seal. But in like SBR, ESBR, he's completely fine. And that's probably round about his domain of where you're going to be using him. However, final blow conditions, do not like them at all. They're so jarring to get. But let me know your thoughts down in the comments of the Warrior in Black. Did you underestimate him? Did you misunderstand his passive? Is he better than you thought he was? Or do you still not like him? Let me know. I'll see you in the next video, guys. Take care of the rest of your day. And peace.